We will immediately terminate President Obama's 2 illegal executive amnesties in which he defied federal law and the Constitution to give amnesty to approximately 5 million illegal immigrants.
We are going to deal with Daca with heart. The Daca situation is a very difficult thing for me because, you know, I love these kids. I love kids. I have kids.
President Trump wavering on his position about the continuation of Daca, changing his stance from the campaign trail to the Oval Office. But now it seems he may have made up his mind. The president is expected to pull the plug on the Obama-era policy that protects young undocumented immigrants from deportation. So what is this program and why does it matter so much now? Daca stands for the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. It's a program that allows young unauthorized immigrants who are brought into the country as children to work and study legally. Today, nearly 800,000 are Daca recipients. That means 800,000 recipients would be directly impacted if the program were to end. The removal could also have a direct impact on the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey. Why? Because Houston has the 3rd largest unauthorized immigrant population in the country, translating to 575,000 people, according to Pew Research. Of that number, nearly 57,000 Houstonians are in the program, and some 68,000 of Harris County residents are Daca eligible. The undocumented workforce in Texas is 1 million, and 23% of that number in construction. Workers that Texas will need to rebuild in the wake of Hurricane Harvey. Joining us now is Kansas Secretary of State Kris Kobach, also leads President Trump's voter fraud commission.
Hey, Kris, good to see you again. Thank you for being with us.
Great to be with you.
Okay, so I'm just trying to figure out the math on this before we get into Daca. You're the Secretary of State for Kansas. You're running for governor of Kansas, and now you have a side gig as a columnist at Breitbart. Is that how it's all working out?
Yeah, pretty much. After dinner some nights I write a column.
All right. Kris, let's talk about Daca. I know your argument that you've made, and I'm sure you'll make it again, that there are legal issues with Daca. Daca, in your opinion, is illegal, and that's why it should be ended. I want to just get back by that for a second. I want to know what you feel is really wrong with Daca, because as Stephanie said, it's got 800,000 or more enrollees, kids that were invited to come out of the shadows and apply for it. They renew it every 2 years. If anybody commits a crime, they don't get on it again, and they all speak English. 45% of them are in school. It seems to me like a brilliant project to get exactly the kind of immigrants this country needs.
Well, a couple of detail corrections. There's 886,000 who've already received it. The eligible population is estimated to be about 1.7 million. And people refer to it as kids. No, Daca now applies to anyone who can be up to 36 years old, who claims that he entered the United States before the age of 16, oftentimes unable to prove it, of course. You simply assert that that's when you came in. The problem with Daca is that Congress in 1996 specifically passed a law. It was intended to end Clinton's catch and release policy, and it said that ICE agents have to put certain people into removal proceedings. The Daca amnesty that President Obama initiated orders ICE agents to break the law. It also violates 2 other federal laws and the constitutional separation of powers. We could have an amnesty for this dreamer population.
Right. So I guess I'm skipping to that. Okay, that's exactly where I'm skipping to. I totally agree with you, but I'm skipping to that to say, given that the president wants to increase economic growth by numbers that Stephanie and I don't think are necessarily attainable, but they would require immigrants. Given that Stephen Miller and the president like immigrants who speak English, doesn't matter whether they're up to 36 years old. Would you support this if Congress actually authorized it, as opposed to it being a presidential order?
I don't think it's advisable, no, because an amnesty will only encourage additional illegal immigration. We saw that with the 1986 amnesty that Reagan signed, and it caused a massive wave of additional aliens coming in illegally, thinking, okay, we'll come in for the next amnesty. So, no, I don't think it's necessary, and I also think there are a lot of U.S. citizens who are underemployed or unemployed. This is an opportunity right now as the economy is starting to rev up for U.S. citizens to get back to work and get off the welfare rolls. So, no, I don't think there's an urgent need for an amnesty policy like this?
Well, we're basically at full employment at 4.4, and to the president's point, illegal immigrations have dropped the president's number, I want to say 70%. Kudos to President Trump since he was put into office. And you say you could be up to 36 years old, but the average person in the program came to the United States when they were 6 years old. They didn't know any better. So from an empathetic point of view, why do this now? These are people who are contributing to society. We educated them. We took care of them. Now they're working. They're providing tax dollars in your own state. If the people who are part of the Daca program were kicked out of the country, Kansas would lose something like $300 million in GDP.
Well, there's a whole bunch of questions packed into that, but let me answer some of them. One is that the individuals in this program, you said, why do it now? The reason there's an impending deadline is that 10 states have written a letter to the Attorney General saying, look, we're going to sue this. The states already won a lawsuit regarding the DAPA, which is a related Obama amnesty, and the courts found very clearly that that was illegal. DACA is illegal for the same reason. So it's not a maybe. It's definitely illegal. It's going back to the Fifth Circuit.
That hasn't been adjudicated. Hold on, Chris. That hasn't been adjudicated yet. The Supreme Court punted on it. DAPA has, DACA has not. Let's just be 100% clear on that.
Right, but actually DAPA was an extension of DACA. It was written as an amendment to DACA.
I hear your argument, but let's just be clear that our viewers don't think that this has been adjudicated.
Okay, the Fifth Circuit, which is the Court of Appeals, has already ruled on the exact same legal issue. You're right, the Supreme Court has not, because they split 4-4. We now have a 5-4 Supreme Court. So if it goes to the courts,
you don't know how Neil Gorsuch is going to vote. You don't know how Neil Gorsuch is going to vote. He hasn't.
No, we don't know. Obviously, you never want to predict any Supreme Court ruling, but I'd be willing to, if you guys want to bet a steak dinner, I'd be willing to bet that the Supreme Court rules it's unconstitutional and illegal.
No one loses if we bet a steak dinner, so I'll take the bet. I guess so. Let's talk about the legalities. I mean, this is not our specialty. It's yours more than it is ours. But this is based on DACA was based on a principle called prosecutorial discretion, right? Prioritizing your prosecution, getting to the most important issues first. Just yesterday, Tom Bossert said at the White House press conference that we're going to give our priorities to getting the people out of here who are both undocumented immigrants and have committed some sort of crime. Again, by definition, if you are in DACA, you can't have committed a crime. If you have committed a crime, you're out.
And you can't get renewed.
From a perspective of and you can't get renewed, correct. From a perspective of prosecutorial discretion, meaning we don't have the endless resources to deal with all of this, these guys aren't a priority.
Well, actually, it's not correct to say that if you haven't committed a crime, you're not in DACA. Actually, DACA allows you to get the amnesty as long as you haven't been convicted. And so in one of the lawsuits I brought on behalf of 10 ICE agents...
If you haven't been convicted,
then you haven't committed
a crime.
Right. So what happens is a lot of gangbangers get arrested, but the state won't have the resources to prosecute all of them, and so they're released. It used to be before DACA that the local county sheriff would release them to ICE in the hopes that ICE would deport them. But we have many cases of such individuals who are getting the DACA amnesty. They've been arrested, they haven't yet been convicted, but that arrest isn't enough to disqualify them from DACA. So the DACA we shouldn't have any illusion here. The DACA is a cross-section of the illegal alien population. There are criminals, there are scholars, but it's not an especially higher achieving cross-section of the illegal alien population.
Okay, but we have to make it clear. If you're not convicted of a crime in the eyes of the U.S. government, we don't believe you've committed one.
Well, but on the other hand, if you have been arrested and you are a gang member, which is some of the case of these DACA aliens,
sorry, sir. No,
that might be the world you want to live in.
I'm sorry, sir.
There
are many
you're
people.
Presumed innocent.
You're presumed innocent until proven guilty in the United States of America.
Removal is not the courts. Okay, right. But let me just unpack what you just said. Removal is not a criminal penalty. If you are removed to your home, you have not been convicted of a crime, and so yes, law enforcement can make judgments and say, you know what. We have to choose. We have limited resources. Which person do we remove first? Let's remove the person who was arrested for gang-banging activity or who is a gang member. That is a decision that can be made, and it's not a presumption of innocence question, because removal, again, is not a criminal penalty you're imposing. You're simply asking the person to go back home.
I'm going to take a leap. I might not know how Neil Gorsuch would vote, But I'm going to take a leap and say Mark Zuckerberg isn't looking to hire gangbangers. He has put together a coalition, a group of CEOs who are backing the dreamers. President Trump, a business-first, pro-business president, as he likes to say he is, why wouldn't he or why wouldn't you see CEOs across the board, the most successful leading CEOs saying, we need these employees. Immigration, these type of employees are going to help us help the U.S. economy. I don't think Mark Zuckerberg is looking to hire the Crips and the thugs.
Well, you often see CEOs and coalitions of business owners who will support amnesty of any sort. They support the legislative amnesties in Congress, and they support an amnesty like this one. Why do they do it? Because they want to see cheaper labor. If you have more labor, especially alien labor, pushed into the market, willing to accept employment for a lower wage or a lower salary, they are allowed to depress wages.
Do you think
There's always been this alliance between those who hire.
For cheap labor?
Sure. Yeah, they want people cheaper. Look, all of these employers would like to hire someone at a lower cost. And
Kris,
so if they employ someone, the same applies to college graduates. If you can get someone from another country at a lower price, many employers, unfortunately, will seek out that person who they can hire for a cheaper price.
Okay, so let me ask you this, because you're going to run for governor, so this is an important idea to think about. We know there are a lot of people in this country who think we should have comprehensive immigration reform. Stephen Miller has come out with this thing called the RAISE Act, which would actually be counter-economically to the president's goal of increasing GDP growth, because to have greater GDP growth in a mature economy like ours, you have to have labor. You have to have people to work. We have a negative replacement rate in the United States, as you know. So you do actually have to get immigrants. We've already got this crowd of people here. So why is it you do accept that we need more immigrants, right, rather than fewer?
Right, but you have to have immigration. I agree, you have to have some immigration, but you have to have immigration that's in the interest of the United States. What the RAISE Act would do is put a reasonable cap on the number of green cards at roughly 500,000 instead of the million that we're doing right now. 500,000 was the number we saw back in the early 90s, and that's a more reasonable number that doesn't push down wages. And we can make adjustments going forward, but let's not have immigration come in that hurts the interest of working class and science and technology workers in the United States. Let's make sure that Americans are better off whenever we allow in people from other countries. Okay, the other problem with
then let's make sure we have that steak dinner.
The other problem is that
and please know,
okay, well, we'll come back to me on
just
that.
For the record, because we're on TV, we're taking the bet, right? Because if Neil Gorsuch votes against Daca, then we have to buy you a steak, and if he doesn't, then you have to buy us a steak. But in the end, all three of us get a steak, which I think is real great.
All right, yes, that we will be on the record for a steak dinner if it gets to the Supreme Court.
All right, then. We're going to leave it there. Kris, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We have to leave it there.
I love it if every interview ended with
a steak dinner.
The potential of us all having a steak.
You know what? You're making me hungry.